The goofballs over at Fox News want to talk to us about evidence for God. Check it out.
The Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has defied and angered the Catholic Church and Christians worldwide after he said he would quit if someone could prove to him that God exists. Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. Duterte has been in office just 2 years, but critics say he has become isolated at home and abroad, in part because of his spat with the church. He not only defied the existence of God, but used expletives to describe the God of the Judeo-Christian Bible. So is it worth taking up Duterte's challenge, or should he just be ignored? And here with his thoughts is Dr. Alex McFarland, author, director of Christian Worldview, North Greenville University. Welcome, Alex.
Well, thank you, Lauren. It's good to be with you.
Well, I hear that since then, Duterte has actually apologized to God. But I'm interested in first what your reaction to all of this is.
Well, you know, he's not the first person that's been on record sort of denigrating God or slamming God. You know, 50 years ago, John Lennon of the Beatles had to make a mea culpa for saying the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. And then, I don't know, 25 years ago or so, Ted Turner said we need to get rid of the 10 Commandments and have the 10 suggestions or 10 voluntary initiatives, and then there was pushback. But at one point, the president of the Philippines there said God or the idea of God was stupid. But I just read in prepping for this interview that he's apologized to God, and if that be the case, I'm glad to hear it and hope it was sincere.
Well, maybe he just got a sudden sense of pragmatism because, you know, the Philippines is a largely Catholic nation, and him as head of state was not showing a lot of sanity and talking disparagingly about God.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's pretty counterproductive, I would think, that if your constituency loves the Lord, then you better not, maybe you don't love the Lord, but at least you don't want to slam the Savior that they believe in. But here's what he said. It was interesting. In his apology to God, he said, I want to be clear, I'm apologizing to God and no one else. He said, but the God I believe in, my God is all forgiving. And to that, to he or anyone, I would say that is true. God is all forgiving. But we have to come to God humbly. The Bible tells us that if we will turn to Jesus Christ and say, Lord, I'm sorry for my sins, and I thank you that you paid for my sins on the cross, that Christ will forgive. He can be forgiven. Duterte, or I found that forgiveness at 21. And so this is a message that we all need to hear, that God is all forgiving, but we have to come to him humbly and repentantly.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question because he brings up the question, though, that can anyone prove that God exists in a sense? In other words, the question is, you know, what proof is there that if there's a God, he would give you proof that he exists? You know, it really becomes this deep philosophical question. And even though he has apologized, the question still looms out there. Is it possible to have an objective standard to prove that God exists?
I think it absolutely is. And we have to qualify what people mean by proof. If they mean a mathematical proof, like we could determine at what temperature steel melts or something like that, no. But you can't mathematically prove that George Washington crossed the Delaware. But in terms of what's called a statistical proof or the preponderance of evidence, God is an absolutely logical, likely inference. Creation had to have a creator. Design had to have a designer. The moral law came from a moral lawgiver. So when you look at all that we know about life, the most logical inference and admission is there is an all-powerful creator, a supernatural, eternal God that is beyond this timely world, a timeless God and creator. So I would say, yes, it is possible to prove God, not in the sense of a mathematical theorem, but in a most logical conclusion based on all the observable evidence.
Yeah, no. Okay, where do I begin with this one? So first of all, I love what outrages people. I mean, it was probably Duterte is carrying out a genocide of drug sellers, drug users. So you would think that that would get the bulk of the ire from the media. Like, oh my goodness, he's openly talking about how regular people should kill drug users in the street, about how, people should kill their siblings, their loved ones if they're drug users. And okay, if you don't have the heart to do it, well then just let the cops do it. So, and the body count is ticking up, man. Thousands of people have been murdered in this drug crackdown, this anti-drug crusade. And by the way, he's also accused of being addicted to fentanyl, the strongest opioid on the planet. So as a guy is taking drugs, and the strongest drug, he's acting like, oh, drugs are evil and drugs are bad and we kill people for doing drugs. So Duterte is a menace, and I have zero love for Duterte. But the thing about I'll quit if you prove to me God exists, I'm sure it was an offhanded comment. I'm sure Duterte is an atheist, not an atheist because he's an intellectual and he actually, thought about it and, read about the topic. No, I'm sure he's an atheist in the same way that, my friend's uncle is an atheist, which is like he's angry at the world for whatever reason, and he's just like, there can't be a God because I'm not a happy person. There are atheists like that. I think we all have to admit that, even though I'm somebody who's not religious. I'm somebody who's an atheist. But yeah, I see different kinds of atheists. I see atheists who are atheists because they're intellectuals, and I see atheists who are atheists because it's just like they're angry at what they thought was a God, and so they're like, well, a God must not exist because I'm just not happy. So he strikes me as that kind of a person. Like, he's just like an angry dude. And so he's like, yeah, if you prove God to me, I'll step down. That's an easy side thing to say and just throw it out there because nobody's going to prove it to you because there isn't a God. Or at the very least, there's no evidence for a God. So I love how that triggers the media because it's like, oh, look how arrogant this guy is, stating things that are totally accurate. It's like, that's not, what a non-bet to make. Like, okay, prove God to me and I'll step down. Nobody's going to prove that. It's not even a comment worth commenting on. So they mention how, there's all these examples of people who have made similar statements and there was a backlash. Who was it? The Beatles said they're bigger than Jesus. Yeah, that's them saying we're really, really big. It's not them putting down Jesus. Although he's acting like it was interpreted that way. I believe it probably was interpreted that way. Or Ted Turner, get rid of the 10 Commandments. Listen, man, that shouldn't even be controversial. If you were to make a list of 10 things that people should never do, that list is like at least half wrong. I pulled them up while he was talking there. You shall have no other gods before me is one of the commandments. Okay, strike one, you're out. That on the list, if you're making a list of 10 things you should never do, that doesn't make the list. You shall have no other gods before me is the first one. You shall not make for yourself an idol. So don't do idol worship. Why? So people, when they're growing up, they look at their dad. If their dad is a strong, figure and provides and teaches them about life, yeah, that's my idol, my dad. Why? There's nothing wrong with, if you're a musician and, whatever, we just mentioned the Beatles. If you're a musician, oh my God, I idolize the Beatles. I want to be like them. People get inspiration from all types of things. What's wrong with that? Because the idol's not God, and that's bad. It's just so weird. That doesn't make a list of the 10 most important things. Don't misuse the name of Lord your God. Oh, please, are we fucking serious? We're 3 in, and none of them have been good yet. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 4 of them wouldn't make the list of the 10 most important things. Honor your mother and father. Wrong. What if your mother and father were fucking murderers? What if they're low-life drug addicts who never took care of you and you were raised by your grandma? What about that? So stupid. Okay, here we go. Finally, one that's real, and we're on the 6th one. Don't murder. Yes, that would make the list of the 10 most important things. Don't commit adultery. That wouldn't make the list of the 10 most important things. You shouldn't do it, but, hey, child rape should be on that list, and it's not. Rape in general should be on that list. It's not. Slavery should be on that list. Don't do slavery. It's not on the list, but they did find time to say, don't do adultery. Don't steal. Okay, good. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Okay. You shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. Don't fuck your neighbor's wife, I think is that one. But, dude, listen. Come on, man. Come on. The 10 Commandments are totally outdated. They're not a list of the 10 most important things you shouldn't do. Just because a few of them are good, like don't murder and don't steal, people are like, well, obviously that's the list of the things you should never do coming straight from God. No. If it was straight from God, 10 out of 10 would be the things you definitely shouldn't do. Now let's get to the meat of it, though. he says, well, is it possible to prove God? It's not mathematically provable. Okay, thank you. That's correct. It's not. But it is statistically provable. What? If you look at the preponderance of the evidence. What evidence? What are you talking about, son? And then he says, well, hey, the design had to have a designer. Listen, here's the deal. That argument falls apart just by doing a little bit of logical deduction. So, okay, in order for everything to look so intricate and in order for everything to seem so complex, I mean, look, I have an eye. My eye is capable of seeing what's out there in the world. So my eye must be so complex and it's so designed that it must have a designer or else my eye wouldn't function properly. So the reason why that's bullshit is any god that would have had the ability to do all of this creation, all of this designing, make all of this complexity, that god, by definition, would have to be way more complex than this world. The designer has to be way more complex than the thing that they designed. But then that begs the next question. Who designed the designer? So if something this complex had to be designed, okay, well then we had a designer. But that designer was also complex. In fact, even more complex than us. So who designed the designer? And then who designed the designer of the designer? If complex things need to have a designer, then that's a never-ending chain backwards of somebody had to design the designer, and then somebody had to design the designer of the design, and then somebody had to, and so on and so forth. So that's not an argument. That's not an argument because you're actually, what they're doing is, and they don't realize it, but what they're doing is scrapping one question and replacing it with an even harder question. See, they think that's an answer. That's not an answer. It's the lack of an answer. Because you just proposed an even harder question. If something complex needs a designer, well then our designer is even more complex than us. So who designed the designer? So now listen, I don't know. I don't know the nature of the universe. I don't know how everything is the way it is. I'm not a fucking genius over here. I just know that what this guy's saying is bullshit. And I think on some level, he knows it's bullshit. And if he didn't know it was bullshit, show him this clip. And by the end of it, if he's being honest with himself, he'll know that what he said there was bullshit. And the final point is, and this actually is funny that I'm covering this today because I just had a run-in with Ben Shapiro on Twitter about this a few days ago. He tweeted something. So Ariana Grande released a goofy song like God is a Woman. Or there's no evidence for God, and why are we even talking about God? Let's not talk about a wizard in space. That's my song. No wizards in space. No Jigglypuff in space. There's my song, Ariana. You like that? Sing that one for me. Okay, so she releases a song called God is a Woman. Silly, whatever. I didn't listen to it. I don't care. Ben Shapiro takes that song, and he, tweeted something, hashtag, and he doesn't know how to do the hashtags properly when you do a long hashtag. You got to capitalize the beginning of each letter, or else it gets lost. He said something like, God is, outside of is real and outside of the realm of space and time, or something like that. And then I responded to him and said, what happened to facts over feelings? This is the guy, I care about facts over feelings. But then you're going to tweet about God is outside of the fucking realm we know of, but he's definitely there. That's not fact. That's your feeling. So that's what this guy said. He goes, the preponderance of the evidence suggests that God is beyond this world. There's literally no way you can know that because beyond this world is by definition beyond the world. So you're in the world. You're not beyond the world. So to say like, oh, God's beyond the world, you don't fucking know. Dude, listen, the only intellectually honest positions are agnostic and atheist. Okay. Agnostic is just somebody who gives a straight up, flat out, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Atheist is somebody who says, I don't know, but I haven't seen any evidence of, therefore I'm going to default to no. Those are the only two intellectually honest positions. If you deviate from that, you're lying to yourself. To yourself. It's not about me. It's not about anybody else. It's about you. You're lying to yourself if you do that. So, anyway, that's my long segment here. But Fox News talking about God in 2018 and doing this thing where they're pretending to be serious. Well, it may not be mathematically provable, but the preponderance of the evidence suggests that it's statistically possible. Fuck off. Fuck off. You're not making any sense, and you probably know it on some level.